Today we are talking about a very unsexy thing, but it is definitely something that will ruin your trip, and that is First, let's start with what causes a blister. The equation for a blister is threefold. It is heat, friction, and moisture, and there are lots of things we can do to keep any of those three or one of those three from happening and avoid a blister. Our first line of defense against blisters when we're going on our hiking or backpacking trip is choosing the right footwear. I have worn many different types of footwear for different hiking trips, anything from running shoes all the way up to a full ankle boot. And everything in between, like a all-terrain shoe, a trail shoe, a mid boot. There are different things that fit the situation. The biggest thing is something your foot is used to. Going out into the backcountry with a new pair of shoes or boots is a horrible idea. Or even taking tennis shoes on something that's extremely rocky. Creates other foot issues like a rolled ankle or the possibility of ripping a very weak shoe open on a sharp rock. So it's best to both have a pair of shoes or boots that you're used to using and picking the right one for the situation. My advice to simplify this is I have a trusted pair of trail shoes by Hoka. There are lots of companies that make them. Those pretty much fit every circumstance I'm in. I do have boots for longer adventures, but I have had my foot in those shoes so many times. I trust that is a comfortable choice for my foot, and it will be a good first defense against blisters. Our second defense against blisters is making sure we're wearing the right socks. I know this seems so simple, but cotton is like a magnet to moisture. That is one of the three things that causes a blister, and it's just best to avoid cotton socks altogether with these types of activities. I know wool or synthetic is a little bit more expensive, but you don't need those for everyday life. So a handful, maybe 2 or 3 pairs will get you through an entire year of hiking, especially if you need to pack an extra pair of socks for a longer trip. The next defense against blisters is on the same train of thought with moisture. Essentially, we need to make sure that we keep our feet dry. There are lots of ways to doing it, like packing an extra pair of socks in the moment we get sweaty, or step in a puddle, which happens all the time on trail, by the way. Spring hiking, water is everywhere, especially in the Eastern Sierras. I can tell you how many times I make a misstep, and the next thing I know, I'm ankle deep in some sort of stream, and it is so exceptionally nice to have an extra pair of socks. So bring that extra pair of socks. Also, if you are a big sweater, like myself, having a stick of antiperspirant to coat your foot in that, it does really help. And lastly, baby powder can be an excellent solution if that's something you feel comfortable with. Keeping the moisture out is a huge deal, and making sure we have additional resources if for some reason it does get wet. The next level of defense is protecting ourselves against hot spots. This is so important. I know none of us want to be an inconvenience on all our hiking friends or family or whoever we're going out with, but as soon as you feel that hot spot develop in your foot, the most important thing is to stop, address which of the 3 lead-up items is causing the pain, fix it, and move on. It's so much better to address it with a hot spot than to be on full-on blister, and really there's nothing you can do at that point, or very little you can do. The next defense is how we avoid the friction part of the equation, and the biggest thing is use a pair of shoes or boots that you have comfortability with and lace them up correctly. I can't tell you how many times I've looked down and seen my shoelace coming undone, and I've hiked through it out of stubbornness, and you know what? More often than not, it has bit me in the butt because the ball of my foot or a toe is loosely rolling in that shoe, and it creates a blister just out of friction alone. None of us want that, so make sure that we are tightening our shoes, not overly tight at the beginning of our trip, and we keep it that way even if it means stopping to readdress that. This is a really underrated tip, which is clip your toenails. I know that generally speaking, this is a good hygiene item, but for long runs, hikes, backpacking trips, making sure that we don't have overly long toenails is a huge deal. I have lost a toenail on a backpacking trip that was both due to footwear and weight, but I have learned my lesson to not go out in the backcountry with overly long toenails. It is so much easier to take really good care of that before we leave than to be out in the backcountry and realize that I have a horrendous issue that's causing me pain for the rest of the trip. So the last one is keeping your feet conditioned. You'd be surprised how underrated throwing on the pack with the weight you're gonna wear for that day, putting on the footwear that you have intended, and going for a brief walk around the block. It'll let you know what position you're in. Is the footwear initially uncomfortable, or does it feel great? It doesn't mean you won't have any problems, it just really reduces the likelihood, especially if you're doing it on a regular basis. If you're gonna do a 5-mile hike with 15 pounds, doing it a half a mile stroll around the block with the same weight and the same shoes 3 days a week leading up to your hike, that will work wonders and give you a level of comfortability. And ultimately what it could do is show you a problem you can prevent, and instead of ruining a really fun, adventurous trip, you're simply going right back home to address the problem, giving yourself time to heal and figure out how to avoid it in the future. That pound of prevention is worth a ton of aftercare. If we do get a blister, how do we take care of it? Now we're past the point of prevention and we are in damage control. If we are at the point of just a hot spot, it is best to go in our pack, look for some moleskin or tape or a blister specific pad, change our socks, apply the friction resistant pad so that the friction will be hitting the pad instead of our foot. It doesn't mean it's gonna go away, but we are drastically reducing the chances that we are gonna make it worse. If you do have a blister form out on trail, do not pop it. Let the fluid stay in that. That is designed to reduce your chances of it getting worse. If it does pop on its own, we have a whole list of aftercare for that. But if it is not popped, let that thing have the fluid in there. Your body is doing that on purpose. But we can address that with the same method as the hot spot to try to avoid direct friction. Last resort, if we absolutely have to drain it, we want to make sure everything's sterile. A dangerous thing would be to get some sort of infection or have an open wound out on trail in a very dirty spot, which is our feet, especially out in the backcountry, because it isn't exactly the cleanest environment. So that is why I keep alcohol pads on me in the backcountry. If it does pop, we want to make sure we get that thing really clean, put on our clean pair of socks, and we do want to address it with some gauze or some sort of tape over gauze to make sure that it's maintaining that clean environment. It is the worst case scenario, but we can take that worst case scenario and keep it from being an emergency by making sure that that open wound or popped blister is not going to create something that is, quite frankly, a disaster for our trip. So make sure that when that happens, clean, clean, clean is the name of the game. And we get our clean socks over gauze after we've alcohol wiped it, and we can move on with our trip. So some helpful tips and tricks. I got 3 of them for you. There is a product called Luco tape. It is a very sticky adhesive, and I know lots of thru hikers that swear by this as blister prevention. So if you have an area that is consistently giving you problems, that is a really good solution. Another tip and trick is to wear gaiters. Sometimes blisters on the friction side is caused by an object going into your shoe. Gaiters do prevent that. I personally don't like gaiters because I just don't like extra things on my feet, but lots of hikers do. And I have had rocks in my shoes, so maybe it's something I should consider in the future. Lastly, a really easy tip is the skin is absolutely affected by how hydrated our body is, so staying hydrated is another way and another tip to keep us from having that happen in the first place. Well, I hope something in this has helped you, and I hope your adventures are blister-free. We're gonna try to keep our adventures with the kiddos blisters-free as well, and I hope you have an amazing adventure, and as always, keep adventuring.